In the previous section, we have discussed how to implement OAuth2 mechanism inside a Spring Boot application by leveraging auth server of GitHub. Similarly, there are many authorization servers provided by social network based companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter. So there are many organizations that they provide their own authorization server, and we can always leverage them in order to implement security inside our web applications. But if you really ask me to consider same GitHub auth server or Google auth server or Facebook authorization server to my web application that I have built inside this course like EazyBank app, it is not a great option. The reason is all these social network based companies or any other company authorization server provided by them will only help you to authenticate an user so that only authorized users can access secured pages inside your application. But if you want to incorporate role-based access management inside a web application, then these auth servers are not a good consideration. Because when you go and adopt these social network based authorization servers, you will not have a flexibility of maintaining roles and authorities based upon your own custom logic that you have. You just have to adopt simple authentication so that only logged in users can access your secured pages. But that's not my requirement inside my EazyBank application. There are certain secured paths where admins can access and similarly users can access. So that kind of role-based authentication and authorization is what I needed. So in order to incorporate OAuth2 login authentication and authorization inside my EazyBank app, I need to consider authorization server products like KeyCloak, Okta, ForgeRock, AWS Cognito. So all these are the products which are focused dedicatedly to provide OAuth2 framework for complex web-based applications. So these products not only will help you in incorporating and implementing OAuth2 framework inside web application, but they also provide a lot of out-of-the-box features like where all your user details like email, password, their roles, everything can be stored inside these products instead of storing them in a database like we are doing right now. Right now, if you can recall our EazyBank application architecture, there is an Angular UI application where the user will provide his username and password, and those credentials will be passed on to a backend application, and Spring Security will evaluate those credentials by using the values present inside the database. And the same backend application is acting as an authorization server and resource server, which is not a good practice if you want to consider for enterprise applications. So basically, the main advantage of OAuth2 framework is to separate your authentication and authorization logic from your business logic. So in order to do that, you should always consider a separate authentication and authorization server, and all your business logic can stay inside a resource server. So in order to achieve OAuth2 framework inside my EazyBank application, I am going to consider KeyCloak auth server and implement authorization framework inside EazyBank app using OAuth2 framework. Again, the reason why I choose KeyCloak auth server is it is open source and it is free to use. And once you understand how to implement OAuth2 framework inside a web applications like EazyBank app using KeyCloak auth server, it is pretty much easy to adopt commercial products that we have available inside the market like Okta, ForgeRock, and AWS Cognito. So due to that reason, I am considering KeyCloak auth server inside this section. So let me explain you what we are going to implement or what kind of changes we are going to make inside our EazyBank application in order to incorporate OAuth2 framework using KeyCloak auth server. Firstly, I will have a resource server which will strictly have REST APIs exposed in order to get resources or data regarding accounts, cards, loans, and other details. So this resource server or backend server will not have anything related to authentication and authorization server. So I'm going to remove all database interaction to perform a login operation. So all those authentication providers password encoders, filters, everything I'm going to remove, and my backend server will simply act as a resource server. So whenever someone try to access it by passing a valid access token, it will give a proper response. So once I built my resource server, next at the same time, I will have a separate authentication server based upon KeyCloak. So inside this KeyCloak authentication server, I will store all my user credentials, their roles, so that I can perform authentication and authorization using KeyCloak auth server. So this way we separated both authentication, authorization logic and business logic into two separate entities. And with that in place, we can have two different kind of applications who are trying to interact with our resource server. One is you may try to connect to a resource server using client applications like Angular based web applications, just like how we are doing right now. So in this scenario, my Angular app application will try to get a access token by connecting with the KeyCloak auth server and passing credentials to it. Once my auth server gives an access token, in the second step, it will go and pass that access token to the resource server, and it will try to invoke any API that is exposed by the resource server, like accounts, loans, or cards. And once my resource server receives an access token, it will go and validate whether the access token is valid or not by connecting with the auth server. And at last, if the access token provided by client application is valid, my resource server will respond with the data that my client application is expecting. The same kind of flow will also happen if you try to consume the APIs exposed by resource server through Postman application or any other backend application which is trying to consume APIs exposed by the resource server. So this way, regardless of what application is trying to connect with the resource server, they have to follow all these four steps. The very first one is they have to connect to the KeyCloak auth server to get a access token. And the second step is the same access token needs to be passed to the resource server while client application trying to consume the APIs exposed by the resource server. Once resource server validate the access token with the auth server, it will respond with a successful response that my client application is expecting. So these are the simple four steps, but don't worry that this seems to be a complicated process. We will implement this step by step, and I can assure you it's very simple. By the end of this section, you will be very confident on how to implement this kind of OAuth2 framework inside any web application. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye.